Power is misunderstood by almost everyone who seeks it. People assume it's about domination, authority, or elevation. But true power has almost nothing to do with strength or hierarchy. Power is psychological architecture. It's the ability to structure the behavior of others without appearing to do so. And the people who rise in corporate, financial, and geopolitical systems are the ones who understand that power is not what you project, it's what you withhold. Before money existed, power was a game of perception. After money was invented, perception simply became easier to monetize. Money organizes power, but it does not create it. The most powerful individuals are not the ones with the largest financial footprint. They're the ones who can shift attention, modify incentives, alter emotional states, and redirect collective behavior without raising their voice. The ones who understand that people don't respond to force, they respond to internal triggers that can be exploited with precision. The psychology of power begins with emotional asymmetry. When two people interact, the one who controls their emotional exposure automatically holds the dominant position. People unconsciously calibrate themselves to the emotional tone of those above them. Calmness signals confidence. Confidence signals advantage. Advantage signals competence. Competence signals leadership. Leadership becomes power. This sequence is instinctive, neural, evolutionary, and entirely predictable. This is why the most powerful executives maintain a posture of cold neutrality. You rarely see them flinch. You rarely see them react impulsively. Their face becomes a strategic instrument, expressionless when evaluating, deliberate when speaking, unreadable when challenged. Not because they lack emotion, but because emotion reveals data. And in the world of power, data is vulnerability. Power is a game of concealment as much as it is a game of command. Most people don't lose influence because they lack ability. They lose influence because they leak too much information about themselves. Their insecurities show. Their desires show. Their need for approval shows. Their fear of confrontation shows. Every emotional leak becomes a thread that someone else can pull. In corporate hierarchies, those threads determine who gets promoted, who gets sidelined, who gets ignored, and who gets used. When you understand the psychology of power, you understand that emotional leakage is the #1 destroyer of strategic positioning. Executives know this. That's why they cultivate a deliberate stillness, not the passive stillness of weakness, but the strategic stillness of someone who knows the game and refuses to play it on emotional terms. Stillness destabilizes others. When people cannot read your intentions, they overinterpret every small signal. Their anxiety increases, their uncertainty grows, they reveal more, they expose their fears, ambitions, and alliances. Silence becomes a diagnostic tool. Power is maintained by making others reveal more than you do. Look at boardrooms, look at negotiations, look at corporate restructures. Notice who speaks first, notice who speaks last, notice who speaks minimally. Powerful individuals don't interrupt, because interruptions reveal emotional urgency. They don't justify decisions, because justifications reveal insecurity. They don't rush, because rushing reveals fear. They don't over-communicate, because over-communication reveals dependence on approval. In every high-level environment, the quietest person in the room is often the one with the most influence, because the room orients itself around their reactions. The psychology of power is the psychology of gravitational pull. You don't need to dominate others when others instinctively calibrate themselves around your emotional neutrality. Power is not loud. It is not performative. It is not theatrical. Power is the absence of noise. Noise is what insecure people produce to distract from their lack of control. Silence is what powerful people use to signal that they don't need validation. And this leads to the second rule of power psychology. Control the frame, and you control the outcome. Every interaction has a frame, an unspoken context that defines how both sides behave. The person who defines the frame controls the interaction. In corporate life, frames determine everything. Are we solving a problem or evaluating your competence? Are we discussing possibilities or approving your request? Are we brainstorming or negotiating? Are we aligning or competing? Most people walk into interactions accepting the frame handed to them. Powerful individuals never accept a frame. They redefine it before the conversation begins. They set the tone with silence, with posture, with pacing, with strategic pauses, with phrasing. They weaponize subtle cues. You may proceed. This is not urgent. I'll consider it. We'll return to that. This doesn't meet our standard. Clarify your position. What are you really asking? Each phrase shifts the power balance. Each phrase forces the other person to reveal more. Each phrase reframes the interaction around the speaker's expectations. Power lies in shaping interpretation, not argument. While the average individual fights to be understood, the powerful fight to define what understanding means. And that is the difference. The powerless communicate content. The powerful communicate structure. Content can be debated. Structure cannot. If you determine the structure of an interaction, you determine the meaning of everything that follows. This leads to the third rule of power. Never be in a position where someone else can dictate your options. Power is not dominance. Power is optionality. Optionality is the silent strength behind every corporate leader. If you have alternatives, you cannot be controlled. If you have leverage, you cannot be coerced. If you have mobility, you cannot be cornered. If you have multiple streams of value creation, you cannot be discarded. People with no options cling to their jobs, their status, their beliefs, their routines. People with deep optionality treat the world like a chessboard. They move when the move advantages them. They wait when waiting compounds leverage. They negotiate without desperation. They walk away without emotional residue. Walking away is the ultimate assertion of power because it demonstrates that you do not depend on the other party's validation or resources. Most individuals cannot walk away. They're trapped by loans, social expectations, titles, identities, ambitions, and insecurities. The system does not need to suppress them. Their lack of optionality suppresses them automatically. The psychology of power rewards those who eliminate personal dependency. This is why powerful leaders behave differently in crises. The average person tries to protect their current position. The powerful abandon the position if it no longer provides leverage. They do not cling to seats. They do not cling to labels. They cling only to advantage. Everything else is negotiable. The fourth pillar of power psychology is invisibility. The most effective power is invisible, because visible power attracts resistance. When people see you as a competitor, they resist you. When they see you as a threat, they fear you. When they see you as an authority, they resent you. But when they cannot categorize you, they submit through uncertainty. Invisibility buys time. Time buys leverage. Leverage buys power. The people who actually shape corporations are rarely the ones on stage. They are advisors, strategists, shadow negotiators, policy shapers, incentive designers, people whose influence flows through structures, not titles. Their names are not known because their power is not symbolic. It is directional. They decide where attention shifts, where resources flow, who rises, who falls, and which narratives become valid. In corporate psychology, the most powerful individual is not the one who speaks the most. It is the one who determines what is allowed to be spoken. This distinction separates symbolic leadership from structural leadership. Symbolic leaders are visible. Structural leaders are influential. Money can buy symbolic leadership. Only psychology can acquire structural leadership. The fifth rule of power is emotional detachment from outcomes. The powerful pursue advantage, not victory. Victory is emotional. Advantage is strategic. Victory ends a conflict. Advantage perpetuates influence. Winners celebrate. The powerful reposition. Winning is not the goal. Winning is a temporary status. Power is a continuous state. You achieve victory to satisfy your ego. You maintain advantage to satisfy your strategy. The psychology of power is anti-ego. Ego makes you predictable. Predictability makes you vulnerable. Vulnerability becomes leverage for others. Powerful individuals cultivate identity minimalism. They define themselves not by labels, but by capability. Not by reputation, but by control. Not by status, but by influence. This is why powerful individuals appear colder than others. Not because they lack humanity, but because they refuse to let identity interfere with strategy. Identity is emotional. Strategy is not. The powerful separate the two. The sixth principle of power psychology is the management of perceived scarcity. People obey those they believe have limited availability. When someone is constantly accessible, they lose psychological altitude. Their presence becomes ordinary. Their words lose weight. Their authority dissolves. Scarcity creates value. Value creates authority. Authority creates power. Powerful individuals limit their exposure deliberately. They speak less often. They respond selectively. They decide slowly, not because they are indecisive, but because scarcity intensifies perceived power. Every action becomes meaningful. Every silence becomes interpreted. Every decision becomes amplified. This is the mathematics of perception. The seventh principle is control of emotional contagion. Human beings unconsciously mirror the emotional states of those they perceive as higher in the hierarchy. If you remain stable, others stabilize around you. If you remain indifferent, others lower their emotional intensity. If you remain analytical, others feel compelled to justify themselves. Emotional contagion makes emotional neutrality an exponential force multiplier. Leaders who lose their composure lose control of the collective psychology of their teams. Leaders who remain steady control the psychological environment their teams operate within. Power is the ability to define the emotional baseline of others. The eighth principle is the management of ambiguity. Clarity gives others a predictable map of your intentions. Ambiguity forces others to prepare for multiple outcomes. Preparing for multiple outcomes drains psychological resources. This creates a subtle hierarchy. The ambiguous individual forces others to adapt, to react, to anticipate. This places them in a position of neurologically induced deference. Ambiguity is not deception. Ambiguity is an energy drain. An energy-drained opponent is a compliant opponent. And then we arrive at the ninth principle, strategic empathy. Not emotional empathy, strategic empathy. The powerful understand people better than the people understand themselves. They don't use empathy to bond, they use empathy to predict. They listen for patterns, not emotions. They observe for leverage, not connection. They analyze motivations, fears, desires, insecurities, ambitions, not to help, but to anticipate. Predictability is the bedrock of control. You cannot control someone you cannot predict. Strategic empathy turns people into readable systems. Human behavior becomes a set of equations governed by incentives, emotional needs, and identity threats. When you understand the equations, you do not need to force outcomes. You simply trigger the variables. And the 10th principle, the deepest layer, is self-governance. The powerful do not dominate others first. They dominate themselves. They control their reactions. They control their habits. They control their impulses. They control their focus. They control their time. They control their environment. They control their exposures. They control their vulnerabilities. Self-governance creates internal power. Internal power manifests as external influence. External influence evolves into structural power. This is the psychology of power. Control yourself first, then control the frame, then control the context, then control the incentives, and the people inside the structure will follow naturally. People think power is about dominance. It is about design. People think power is about winning. It is about positioning. People think power is about money. It is about minds. People think power is aggressive. It is quiet. People think power is personal. It is structural. And once you understand these laws, you no longer chase power. You build it. You no longer seek influence. You generate it. You no longer fight for position. You create the position others fight for. This is the psychology of power, not as illusion, not as theory, but as an operating system for those who understand that control comes long before currency.